I was stationed in Al Udeid Air Base in Qatar when the email came through. It was a simple subject line: "Let's end this with dignity." I remember standing outside the barracks, the desert heat pressing into my back, and reading those words over and over. My name is Marcus Holt. I'm 39, a technical sergeant with the U.S. Air Force. That email was her way of ending a 12-year marriage. No explanation, just a cold attachment with a scanned signature. She said she'd filed. She said she'd moved out. She said casually that she had emptied our joint account to start over. I was 7,000 miles from home with nothing but dust in my lungs and silence in my chest. If you believe karma always comes for those who betray trust, type "justice always wins" in the comments. I didn't break down. I didn't slam lockers or punch walls. I've learned through war and through life that emotion clouds strategy. So, I swallowed it. I closed the laptop, wiped the sweat from my neck, and headed to maintenance control to finish my shift. No one could know what just shattered behind my calm expression. Not yet. What Lauren didn't know was that while she'd been slipping out of our marriage, I'd already been preparing for this exact kind of betrayal. The signs had been there before I left. Late-night errands, new friends she never introduced me to, secretive messages she read but never replied to in front of me. She told me I was imagining things, that it was just deployment nerves, and maybe I wanted to believe that, but deep down I didn't. That's why I moved half my important documents to a locked container at my cousin's auto shop. That's why I took my name off the second checking account and opened one of my own just in case. I remember the night before deployment. She hugged me like a stranger, distant, like I was an inconvenience, not a husband. My gut twisted, but I told myself I was just being paranoid. I was wrong. She filed for divorce 3 weeks after I landed overseas. What she didn't expect was that I'd been building my defense in silence long before she ever clicked send on that email. The car was in my name. The house was too, thanks to a grant from my father's passing. She never even noticed that I removed her access from the digital deed management platform 3 months prior. I didn't do it out of malice. I did it out of instinct. And that it was about to save everything she thought she had stolen. I spent that night not thinking about heartbreak but about my next move. And when you're trained for combat and betrayal hits you personally, you don't break, you plan. The next morning, I walked into the comms room like nothing had changed. I ran a systems check, coordinated the daily maintenance schedule, and answered a few base-wide alerts. Routine stuff, but in my mind a different kind of mission had started. One that didn't involve aircraft or technical malfunctions but betrayal, exposure, and financial recovery. I wasn't thinking like a heartbroken husband. I was thinking like a soldier on recon, gathering intel, tracking movement, and preparing a controlled response. Lauren had always underestimated me. She thought I was too trusting, too slow to react, too absorbed in my duty to see the signs. And maybe for a while, I was. But that version of me didn't exist anymore. I wasn't going to come home to a broken life and a drained account. She'd stolen money that didn't belong to her. What she didn't realize was, some of it was protected by my service benefits, and touching those accounts without authorization, that's a federal offense. I logged into the online banking portal that night. She hadn't just emptied our joint checking, she'd transferred nearly $62,000 from our savings into another account. One I didn't recognize. She also canceled the auto pay on our mortgage. Even though I had wired a payment just before my deployment, it was clear now. She didn't just want to leave. She wanted to burn everything behind her, but she had no idea the house she was sitting in, the one she brought her new boyfriend into, was never legally hers to begin with. I called my cousin Elijah back in Maryland from a secure line. "It's happening," I said. He knew what I meant. We'd talked before I deployed. I had given him power of attorney over certain assets, just in case. "Run the backup plan," I told him. "Start with the title lock in the vehicle file." Elijah didn't ask questions. He was a combat vet too. He knew the tone in my voice meant this wasn't just about money. It was war. And it was personal. By the next morning he'd already filed notices with the county clerk's office, flagged suspicious movement on the property, and initiated a title freeze on the house, which meant Lauren couldn't legally refinance or sell without triggering an alert to my lawyer. The trap was set. All I had to do now was wait. What Lauren didn't understand was that betrayal changes a man. It sharpens him. I wasn't out for revenge. I was out for justice. She thought I'd be stuck overseas, unable to respond. But what she failed to remember was that I'd spent my entire career solving crises remote, and she was just another crisis. 2 weeks later I received a secure message from my attorney back in D.C., Janice Mercer. a no-nonsense military spouse with 2 decades of experience handling deployment-related cases. I'd worked with her once before on a property transfer and had flagged her as a just-in-case contact. The message was simple. We need to talk. Something came across my desk this morning that has your name and her fingerprints all over it. Janice had received a notification from a title company regarding a refinance attempt on the house. Lauren had tried to extract over $180,000 in equity. The problem, my name was still the only one on the VA back deed, and she had submitted forged documents that tried to suggest I had granted her power of attorney. It wasn't just reckless. It was criminal. Janice flagged it immediately and forwarded it to the county fraud division. While Lauren was playing house with her new partner, I was quietly turning every move she made into evidence. I didn't respond to her emails. I didn't engage with the divorce documents. Not yet. My silence was strategic. The more she assumed I was broken and unreachable, the more bold she became, and bold mistakes make great leverage in court. A few nights later, I logged into our old home security system, one she had completely forgotten I had cloud access to. I clicked through the footage. A man, mid-30s, average build, sleeveless shirt, was walking our dog. My dog. He was using my grill, drinking from the Navy tumbler I left by the sink. I watched Lauren laugh in the kitchen with him, the same kitchen I installed tile in the summer before. It stung. Yes, but more than anything it focused me. That same night I contacted a digital forensics expert Janice had worked with in the past. We pulled every instance of login attempts, location pings, bank activity, and even emails Lauren had sent using our shared home Wi-Fi. Every piece of data told a story, and every story ended with her thinking I was gone for good. But I was gathering receipts. Quietly, methodically, and legally. My final move from base was a call to the Office of Service Members Legal Defense. I filed a report under the Service Members Civil Relief Act, notifying them of financial manipulation and potential fraud conducted while I was on active duty. That report triggered an internal review, and that meant Lauren was no longer just up against me. She was now under the watch of the Department of Defense. By the time I touched down stateside 3 weeks later, the pieces were already in motion. I didn't tell Lauren I was coming home. I didn't call her. I didn't even go near our house. Instead, I checked into a quiet motel outside Silver Spring under a different name, and met Janice that evening at a diner off Route 29. She slid a folder across the table thick with printouts, documents, and surveillance logs. "Marcus," she said, "we've got her in at least 4 separate acts of fraud." The refinance paperwork she submitted contained a forged signature, one close to mine but not quite right. My middle initial was off. The handwriting didn't match the records on my military ID or driver's license. Worse, she had listed her boyfriend, a man named Darren Cole, as a financial co-signer. Janice had already run his background 2 prior fraud investigations, both settled quietly. It wasn't just Lauren being reckless. She was in deep with someone who had done this before. "She tried to sell your life from under you," Janice said, flipping through the bank activity. "These aren't random mistakes. They're steps. Calculated ones." I stared at the pages in silence. I remembered the small moments from before I left. Her distant tone. The gym bag she never used. The nights she stayed with her sister. Every doubt I had buried now had a paper trail. She wasn't unhappy. She was plotting. The next day, I drove past our house. Darren's truck was in the driveway. The dog was in the yard. My dog, I parked a few blocks away, pulled out my phone, and opened the home security feed. I watched as Darren came out, kissed Lauren on the porch, and locked the front door behind him, the same door I installed 2 winters ago. He had no idea every step he took was being backed up to a server I now shared with federal investigators. That night, Janice contacted a fraud examiner from the Department of Veteran Affairs. Since the house was acquired under a VA home loan, the moment Lauren forged a document related to its equity, it became federal. She wasn't just guilty of lying to a bank, she had violated military loan protections. That turned everything into a ticking time bomb. And then came the text. Lauren messaged me out of nowhere. "We need to talk. It doesn't have to be ugly. No apology. No regret. Just control." As if I was still operating on her terms. I didn't reply, because soon, everything she built on fraud, on betrayal, on stolen signatures was going to come crashing down on her head. 2 days later, the local bank branch called Janice. They had just received a notice from federal investigators requesting a hold on all funds linked to the fraudulent refinance. Lauren's attempt to withdraw another $15,000 had triggered a fraud flag. The transaction was frozen. Her access to the account was temporarily suspended. The walls were closing in, and she hadn't even noticed yet. That morning, Darren tried to call the bank to complain about his money being inaccessible. He didn't realize the call was being recorded, and Janice, having already subpoenaed the account records, was CC'd on the report. "I'm telling you," he had said, "my girl's husband is out of the picture. He's overseas. I don't care what name's on the papers." That one sentence, it became the center of the fraud complaint we sent to the FBI's Financial Crimes Division. Lauren sent me a second email, a longer one this time. "You're making this harder than it needs to be. We can divide things fairly. Let's not drag lawyers into this." I almost laughed when I read it. She had already emptied accounts, forged documents, and attempted to steal a home, and now she wanted to keep it civil. No, this wasn't about fairness anymore. This was about consequences. I went back through my deployment journal that evening. Just a habit I'd developed in service. Writing down observations and reflections. I found the entry from the night before I left. "Something's off with Lauren. Trust your gut. Protect what matters." I remembered that version of me, hoping he was wrong, but preparing just in case. I was proud of him now. He'd given me a foundation to stand on while everything else tried to collapse. We filed the lawsuit that week. Formal charges of fraud, identity theft, and VA loan manipulation. Janice handed the papers to a process server who delivered them straight to Lauren's workplace. The timing wasn't petty. It was surgical. We knew she'd be meeting a loan officer that same afternoon to fix the freeze. Instead, she was handed a court summons in front of her new boyfriend. Checkmate. And yet I still hadn't spoken a word to her. No angry rants. No retaliation. No need. Because when someone tries to bury you while you're gone, but you come back stronger, smarter, and backed by federal law, you don't yell. You just let justice speak for you. Lauren didn't respond to the lawsuit directly. Instead, I got a call from her attorney. A younger guy with too much confidence and too little experience. "My client is willing to settle privately if you'd be reasonable," he said. Janice smiled as she listened on speaker. "We'll see how reasonable she feels once the forgery charges are formally filed," she replied. The call ended shortly after that. Their tone had changed, and it would only get worse for them. Behind the scenes, the FBI had taken interest in the pattern. Darren Cole had been involved in 2 similar situations with other women. Each time he encouraged them to cash out equity from homes tied to absent spouses. Each time he walked away with a portion of the proceeds. Lauren wasn't just dealing with a boyfriend. She had partnered with a predator. And now, with the evidence in place, the investigation officially crossed from civil to criminal. Meanwhile, I kept gathering footage of Darren using my truck. Records showing Lauren listing the home on a private seller site without my consent. Emails between her and a realtor confirming her intention to sell fast and move out before Marcus returns. Every detail, every timestamp was like a hammer striking a nail, building the case, securing the outcome. One evening I drove past the house again. The porch light was on. The living room flickered with the TV I bought the Christmas before last. Part of me wanted to knock. Not to fight. Just to look her in the eye and ask why. But I didn't. Not yet. The system was doing what it needed to do, and I had no interest in giving her a warning shot. The next morning, Janice received notice that the refinance account had been frozen indefinitely pending investigation. Lauren's assets were now under audit. Her attempt to open a new account under a maiden name was flagged and blocked. The financial web she thought she spun so cleverly had collapsed on itself. She finally messaged me again that night. "I don't know what you're trying to prove, but this is getting out of hand. You're being cruel." Cruel? I stared at those words, jaw tight. I thought about the email, the stolen money, the fake signature, the man in my home, walking my dog. I didn't respond, because sometimes silence is the loudest form of justice. It was early morning when the call came. Agent Rowe from the Financial Crimes Task Force had reviewed the case file Janice submitted weeks earlier, along with the surveillance footage, forged loan application, and Darren's background. "We've seen this pattern before," he said, "but this is the cleanest evidence we've had yet. We're issuing warrants for both of them." I didn't speak for a second. My heart wasn't racing. It was still steady. This was never about revenge. It was about accountability. That afternoon, federal agents arrived at the house. Darren answered the door, confused and half-dressed. Lauren came into view behind him, clutching her phone, already dialing someone, maybe her lawyer, maybe her sister. It didn't matter. They both stood on the same porch where she used to kiss me goodbye before deployments. And now she watched her boyfriend be placed in cuffs for conspiracy and financial fraud. Then came her turn. not as a bystander, but as a co-conspirator. I didn't show up at the scene. I stayed away, not because I didn't want to see it, but because I didn't need to. I wasn't the same man who left for Qatar 6 months ago hoping the woman he loved would wait. I was the man who came back with a case number, a strategy and a line she never thought I'd cross. The courtroom would be the only place I'd look her in the eye again. A few days later, Janice forwarded me the footage from their arraignment. Lauren stood with her arms crossed, tight-jawed and red-eyed, while the judge read the charges: attempted mortgage fraud, financial deception during active military duty, and false signatures on federal documentation. The maximum sentence was 5 years. Darren's list was longer. He had priors. His bail was denied. Lauren's attorney reached out again, this time with a different tone. She's willing to accept a full financial settlement and drop her claim to the house, the truck and any spousal benefits if you're willing not to press further charges. I asked Janice one question: will she confess in writing? When she said yes, I signed the agreement. I didn't need more. I had already won. The day I officially regained full control of the house title, I visited once. Just once. The locks had been changed, the furniture removed, the air hollow and unfamiliar. I walked through the hallway I painted by hand, stood in the room where she once said she'd wait for me, and felt nothing, no hate, no sadness, just the final breath of a chapter that had already ended months ago. I left a key on the counter, closed the door, and never went back. 6 months later, I was living in a new town, in a house I picked on my own terms. Smaller, simpler, surrounded by silence and pine trees instead of noise and betrayal. I took a civilian contractor role at an aviation firm just outside Asheville. The work was steady, the pay was good, and no one there knew my history. I liked it that way. I wasn't running. I was rebuilding. Quietly, brick by brick. The settlement money was wired into my private account in full. Lauren forfeited all legal rights to the house, the truck, and my military pension. Her confession sat in a locked file on my attorney's desk, signed, notarized, undeniable. Darren took a plea deal. He'll be serving 5 years in federal prison. Lauren got 2 years probation and mandatory restitution monitoring. I never heard from her again after the agreement. She disappeared into whatever new version of herself she was pretending to be. But me? I didn't just survive. I transformed. I started woodworking on weekends, a hobby I'd never had time for during deployments. I adopted a dog from a shelter, a quiet shepherd mix I named Rex. He doesn't replace what I lost, but he guards what I've built since. Some nights I sit on the porch and listen to the wind move through the trees, and I remember the man I was before everything collapsed and the man I had to become when it did. One afternoon, I got a letter, handwritten, no return address. The handwriting was familiar. It was from the wife of another deployed soldier, someone who had nearly fallen into the same trap with the same kind of man. She wrote, "Because of your case, they caught him before he could take everything. You don't know me, but thank you." I read it twice. Then I pinned it to the fridge, like a medal that didn't need a uniform. I don't live in bitterness. I don't replay the betrayal. I remember it only enough to honor the strength it awakened in me. Because when someone tries to erase your life, and you rise anyway, you don't owe them anger. You owe yourself peace. And peace is what I earned, one brutal step at a time. So no, I didn't just lose a marriage. I reclaimed a man I hadn't seen in years. And that man, he's still here. Still standing, still moving forward. Not because she let me go, but because I let her stay behind.